Hello everyone, welcome to the next section. So let's pay attention to the directions. Solve for the indicated side length. We're going to round all of these side lengths to the nearest tenth. We know that that means one spot after the decimal. So every single one of these should have a number, even if it's just 0 after the decimal spot. And so on this very first one, we just need to figure out what kind of trig am I going to be using. I know I'm using normal trig, meaning that all of these are going to be over 1. And I'm going to cross multiply when I'm using normal trig to find side lengths. And we're going to round those to the nearest tenth. So we just need to see what we have. So from 44's perspective, what pieces do I have? What is my t and what is my 22 that's listed? So from the 44, this is going to make what I call this is the hardest one to see because you got to look across from it. We're used to checking for opposite and it's not there, it's blank. And so I call this the crocodile's mouth because the adjacent and the hypotenuse tends to be the hardest one for y'all to see. So that is going to be adjacent and hypotenuse. So this is my adjacent, this is my hypotenuse. Which one goes with adjacent and hypotenuse that is absent of the opposite? That's our cosine, cosine for crocodile's mouth. So that's going to be the cosine of 44 degrees. We fill in the angle right after. You can see I've done that up here. People tend to forget where to put the angle, so I've put a spot for y'all. Cosine of 44 is equal to 44's adjacent, which is t, over 44's hypotenuse, which is 22. We put this over 1 and we're going to cross multiply. When I cross multiply, thankfully I always start with the t. Thankfully the t is already by itself. I say that it's times 1, which is just t. So it's already alone on one side by itself. And then we're going to multiply that by the coefficient of 22 times the cosine of 44 degrees. We want to separate those numbers just so we don't have to type extra parentheses into our calculator. So that's 22 times the cosine of 44. Let's see what we get when we do that. Again, make sure your calculator is in degrees. That's something that it should say DEG on the screen. Okay, and you will know that it is if you get an acute angle measure. This is going to give me approximately, I'm going to round it to show that it's rounded, 15. You know what? Let's do this first. Let's just start with this. Some people have struggled with rounding. So in the calculator, here's what pops up. 15.825 dot, 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 dot. That's what's in my calculator. So to round it to the nearest tenth, this is the tenth. The 8 is in the 10th position. So the 2 is the one that tells it whether we should stay at 0.8 or whether we should round it to 0.9. Those are our only two options. It's either going to stay at 0.8 or round to 0.9. Because this is a 2, because it's lower than 5, that's going to get to stay at 0.8. So t is going to be approximately 15.8. 15.8. Okay, so when we round, we want to make sure that we're paying attention to the directions of what they want us to round this to. And then the only thing that I've asked y'all to do is to check yourselves before you wreck yourselves. Y'all know that's one of my favorite phrases. When I say check yourself before you wreck yourself, that means just go back into the picture and put about a 15.8 right here and make sure that it makes sense in regards to the triangle. Is 15.8 in fact less than the hypotenuse of 22, since a leg should be less than that hypotenuse? And yes, it is. So that's a really good way to catch yourself to see if you've accidentally divided instead of multiplying, or if you're in a weird setting on your calculator. Just make sure that your answers are making sense. All right, so from number 6, we are going from the perspective, the angle. So sometimes I'll say, hey, here's your eyeball. The little degree symbol is your eyeball. Put an eyelid on it. We're looking at the triangle from 70's perspective, from that acute angle. So from 70's perspective, we have a 30 and we have an x. What is the 30? The 30 is the opposite. What is the x? The x is adjacent. So what trig function goes with opposite and adjacent? That is going to be our tangent. Our tangent. So that's going to be the tangent of the angle, the tangent of 70 degrees, is equal to its opposite, which was 30, over its adjacent, which was x. Again, we're looking for a leg, so we're going to cross multiply. And unfortunately on this problem, when I cross multiply, x is going to be multiplied by the tangent of 30. X times the tangent of 70 degrees is going to be equal to 1 times 30, which is just 30. And so we are going to have to end up dividing by the tangent of 70. So this is a division problem because our x was in the denominator. So when you divide by the tangent of 70 on both sides, the tangent of 70 cancels out on the left-hand side, and x is going to be by itself. So you're just going to type this into your calculator. Let's see what we get. 30 divided by the tangent of 70. 30 divided by tan 70. Okay, I'm going to write exactly what we get. 10.91910 dot, 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 dot. Okay, so which digit is in the 10th spot, the nearest 10th? The 9 is in the 10th spot. And so who tells it whether it needs to stay at 0.9 or round up to 11.0? The 1. And so my only two options are 10.9 or about 11.0. But because the 1 is lower than 5, we're going to round that to 10.9. Okay, again, check yourself before you wreck yourself. Make sure that's a good answer. If the 30 is the opposite, would it make sense for the other leg to be adjacent at 10.9? And it would. Okay, let's do this again. Let's see, we're going from the perspective of who? Oh, we're changing perspectives here. We're going to the 64-degree angle. So from 64, I have this piece and I have this piece. What is the x to the 64? That is opposite. And the 30 is the hypotenuse. So what goes with opposite and hypotenuse? The ratio that goes with opposite and hypotenuse is sine. And so we're going to write that out. That's going to be the sine of the angle. Let's see, the sine of 64 degrees. From that perspective, x is its opposite, 30 is its hypotenuse. So again, I put this over 1 so that I can cross multiply since I'm solving for a side length. X times 1 is just x, and that's going to be equal to 30, the coefficient, times the sine of 24. So 30 times the sine, of 64. Can't read my own handwriting. 30 times the sine of 64. So when I type that in, 30, y'all can see how easy it is to make a mistake, times the sine of 64, and that is going to give me exactly 26.9638, ... Okay? So when we round this to the nearest tenth, we look at the 9, that's in the nearest tenth spot. The 6 is going to tell that to round up. So since that rounds up to 0.0, this is going to be approximately 27.0. 27.0. Now we want to make sure that that makes sense in regards to our picture. So if you go put a 27.0 here, does that make sense? Is that less than the hypotenuse of 30? Yes, it is. So if I had accidentally typed in whatever number I said instead of 64 earlier, I would have known rather quickly that I had done something wrong. Okay. So that is 3 of those. So far we have 1 cosine, 1 tangent, and 1 sine. We have a few more of these on here just so that y'all can practice these. So from the 33's perspective, we have our opposite, we have our hypotenuse. We know that that's sine. So the sine of 33 degrees is going to be equal to its opposite, 14, over its hypotenuse, x. Many of you have picked up on the fact that when this happens, it's going to be division. So if you wanted to go ahead and just flip-flop your x and your sine of 33, you can, meaning that this would be equal to x is equal to 14 divided by the sine of 33. You cross multiply. That is a division problem. And so what you do is you type that in, 14 divided by the sine of 33. And you're going to get exactly 25.705, ... So my nearest tenth is the 7. The 0 says to stay on the same level. So this is approximately 25.7 as a side length. Let's make sure that makes sense in regards to the picture. If this was 25.7 as a hypotenuse, that is more than the leg of 14 like I expected it to be. Okay. This one tends to be the hardest for people to see. So we are so used to going and getting our opposite first. So when that opposite is blank, what that tells me is going to happen is that I have the crocodile's mouth, I have an adjacent, and I have a hypotenuse. So I have an adjacent and a hypotenuse. That adjacent and hypotenuse frame that angle. Both of those are rays of that angle, and so that is going to be cosine. That just gives me something extra to look for when that opposite is missing. It's going to be equal to 14 over x. Not x over 14 because it's got to be adjacent over hypotenuse. And so I'm going to put this over 1. And again, when I cross multiply, this ends up being multiplied by the cosine of 37. So I know that ultimately I'm going to have to divide by the cosine of 37. So I hope that you're picking up on that. If not, you would just have to do the extra step. Okay, so we're going to type that into our calculator. 14 divided by the cosine of 37. Okay, 17.5298, ... So the 5 is in the 10th spot. The 2 tells us to stay on that exact same level. So about 17.5 would be what that is rounded. Again, let's check ourselves. Go put that here in the picture. 17.5 as a hypotenuse is bigger than the adjacent leg, like we expected it to be. All right, number 10. So we've got the 37-degree angle. From the 37-degree angle, we have an x and we have a 20. So what is the x? The x is opposite, while the 20 is adjacent. This is something I am never going to be in my life. tan. This is going to be our tan tangent ratio. So the tangent of what angle? The tangent of 37 degrees is equal to 37's opposite, which is x, over 37's adjacent, which is 20. So we put this over 1 so that we can cross multiply. X times 1 is just x, and that's going to be equal to 20 times the tangent of 37. 20 times the tangent of 37 degrees. So we expect that to be 20 tangent of 37. That is going to be 15.071 dot, 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 dot. So what's in the 10th spot? The 0. But this 7 tells me that I need to round it up to 15.1. So does that make sense as an answer? Yes, it does. 15.1. If the other leg is 20 and that's 15.1, we know that we're in the ballpark of where we need to be. So that was using solving for indicated side lengths. The next section in the next video, we're going to look at solving for angles. So instead of using normal trig like we have been in cross multiplying, that's where we're going to use inverse trig on our next video.